Thank you, Dr. Manu Prakash, for this wonderful talk. And I hope you don't mind if I switch back and forth between Manu and Prakash. And first of all, let me congratulate you on winning this Unilever Colworth Prize. This one is prestigious prizes that Microbiology Society gives out annually. I must say that your talk is always very, very um, exciting and inspiring. I think inspiring is the probably the best word to describe your presentation. I still remember vividly the first time I heard you at the American Society of Microbiology conference, and thanks for accepting our nomination and the award. So let's get a little bit into what got you started on this journey, because I think for me that's most exciting. You are in a very prestigious institution. You have your own commitment, but yet you do things that is completely outside the realm of your expectations. So can you talk to us about it?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you so much. I'm absolutely honored. I wish we could have all met in person and shared insights, but it's remarkable as a society, and especially the value of sharing the gift and privilege that we have of curiosity with the broadest group of people. So I'm really humbled by this, and thank you so much for this honor. Uh, I think for me, growing up and who I became as a scientist, the idea of sharing and the access to science is an integral part of the fundamental discoveries that we make, both as a lab. Uh, I do this work not in the context of outreach versus what I'm pursuing as a question. Living systems have inhabited this planet for a very long while. And if we truly mean to understand them in their full glory, we have to have the capacity to observe them in their native habitats around the world. And what better way than to empower people to actually engage and observe with us? So I think I have made fundamental discoveries, literally finding an object and a microbe, literally looking only through my microscope, my foldscope. And my hope often enough is that that sense of joy and discovery, if we can share that in the broadest group of people, that begins a lifetime of commitment to science for someone else. So to me, this is not either or. It really is folded very intricately in how I think and how I am as a scientist. And I'm actually very happy. In the last decade or so, we have committed to deploying these tools in the community. The communities have become far more powerful and important than the tools that we have deployed, because these communities have been able to tackle problems that I just myself wasn't even aware of, forget about having the capacity to work on. I think it just is a joyful moment for me, and our work is not done. We have a long way to go, but on the other hand, it is who I am as a person.
But you make when you started in this journey early in your career, um, there was no financial support. There is no, most people will look at you, here comes the, does he have a crazy ideas? And yet you were able to surpass those things. What made it possible for you to deal with so many naysayers in your journey to this point?
Yeah, I think you touch on a nerve there. uh, uh, I'm sitting here just reading two naysayers a few minutes ago on something. Science is, we do science because of our internal compass. And sometimes it's essential to be aligned with that internal compass. Um, you're right, we had an extremely difficult time trying to be able to fund a project like this. especially because just going beyond writing papers, which was not the goal of this, we wanted to deploy this tool broadly. And I remember explicitly one day in the lab, sharing with the lab that, we will build and deploy 50,000 of these around the world to anybody who asks for. And I remember reaching out to every possible organization I could, and just it didn't click somehow. This idea that deployment and sharing technology and capacity is an equally important part of the work of invention of technology. I'm very fortunate. I accidentally met a remarkable individual at Moore Foundation, and she understood both our passion and our desire to do this and supported the first round of the work. But literally, that was after 15, 20 organizations that you would typically take ideas like this to. I explicitly remember we spent to ship those 50,000 microscopes, we spent 70 to $80,000 just shipping instruments to Sudan and remote parts of India and remote rural US, and it was really labor of love. I really have to say this. We are at this point where we have deployed roughly 1.5 million foldscopes,
Wow.
and it's become one of the largest microscopy community in the world. But on the other hand, the beginnings were definitely far rougher. And I often think about, what if I had decided to give up? What if I had moved on? I work on many broad range of technologies, but I think the lessons in implementation science, which is an integral part of discovery and sharing that joy. Yeah, there are often these moments that you make decisions that you don't comprehend yourself, and I think one of those decisions was deploying these tools.
Oh, that's a excellent decision, I must say. I personally I have moved on from certain things, and looking back, and I think, oh, why did I do that? So that needs a certain amount of grit to
Mhm.
stay on this course, and obviously, at the end, you saw the fruit of your labor, and these folder scopes are amazing, and I think there is a lot more to do. There are more people can be reached, but I think they also need to have interest, right? Um, I want to address one other comment you made, and that has been bothering me a little bit. So the thing that you mentioned earlier was, you need to work with the people's curiosity. I often find this younger students, the students we get these days, seem to lack curiosity. Somewhere along the way, they lost the sense of, you know, to be curious about everything. I'm curious about everything. So where does that happen, and why there seems to be a generation who is more interested in doing less curious things? And do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I think it's a tough question. I would actually argue that uh, we don't lose our curiosity. It's suppressed by the system in many ways, and individuals, human race as a whole, we're born curious. We are born to ask questions. We're born to taste, feel, smell every possible thing. Uh, and the way and what we call education and how we structure education has a lot to do with what is allowed and what is not allowed.
Right.
I grew up in an environment where I didn't know the definition of a scientist. It's not as if I was looking to be something. uh, I was pursuing questions that bothered me. And I think this is fundamental to the spirit of sharing scientific tools as broadly as possible rather than sharing knowledge, which at this point is free. Anybody could Google about a name of a microbe. If you haven't come face to face with a microbe before, which I would say majority of the planet has not, although our life runs because of microbes, and the life shuts down because of microbes,
Hope
as
so.
we are facing right now, how is it that this capacity to see and observe and feel is not a fundamental part of our daily lives? Why are we not having, why are microscopes not on dinner tables? That is a question I ask myself every day, and I'm actually quite serious about it. I've felt often
Yes.
enough that a direct connection with the living world at the smallest length scales and the largest length scales allows people to flourish in their own sets of capacities. And I think I would argue curiosity in today's day and world is a privilege. And I say this sort of with a heavy heart because, as an academic, I am allowed to be curious because of taxpayers' money and because people fund what I do and questions that I ask that may or may not have relevance to their daily lives. But as a society as a whole, we value curiosity. But we need to enable and share that privilege with the broadest group of people. And I think the kind of evaluation based culture we have in education, which is so early on that you need to be right, is so damaging in many ways because
Right.
then students can learn to be right, but they might forget how to ask questions. So I would
Yes.
much rather live in a world where we value the capacity to ask good questions rather than be right. And I think this is a long road. Many communities and people have made commitments to really overhauling education. If you look at the sustainability goals, it's a very long road, and I wish, from an investment perspective, much larger investments were made in not just providing knowledge to people. I think tremendous amount of information and content is being created,
Mm-hmm.
but you turn students into consumers, and I would rather have them be creators themselves.
Yeah.
So I'm optimistic about this. I don't feel any, you know, I what I have seen so far, I can tell you just remarkable insights in young individuals when they were given a chance to explore. And I think we have to be honest about exploration is unknown and you can't grade it. You really have to let people thrive and give them the time and capacity that they need. So my hope is the dialogue will change.
Mm-hmm.
uh, Universities across the world, schools across the world, scientists across the world can do something about it. It's not as if we we built this system, so we
Right.
can
Oh, no,
tear it down
absolutely.
and we can build it again.
I agree with you. I love when the experiments fail, when the
Mhm.
students come and they say, "Oh, my experiment failed," and I was like, "That's great, right? Now we
Yeah,
can ask why."
yeah,
And what where did we go wrong and how do we fix it. So
yeah,
I when the students come to me and say, oh, it wasn't as expected, I said, that's fantastic. I don't want to know the answers as expected, then we're not asking the right questions.
yeah.
And asking question is such an important thing. And I, even in the world of, computer and Google,
Mhm.
even with all the information in your at your hand, at your fingertips, if you don't ask the right question, you're not going to get the answer. And I think we have to really teach people how to ask questions. So I read this book, The Power of Inquiry to Spark Breakthrough Ideas. Have you
Mhm.
read that by Warren Burger?
No.
It's an amazing book, and it's the title is A More Beautiful Question. And he talks about how every invention started with a question and a quest by the person who questioned not to give up, as someone like you. And he also talks about how parents, after a while get tired of answering the questions. They will just tell the children to shut up or to say, stop it or whatever. So you slowly erode the
Yeah,
ability to ask question. And I think that is something to it. I think we should never stop the children from asking why. And I think if we continue to encourage that part of their personality, I think the children will go very far.
yeah.
So, so that was very nice, and I highly recommend the book. It's really nice
Mhm.
book to read. Uh, moving forward, and you have, I mean, the folder scope has been a huge influence across the globe in a really low income, low resource setting, um, and including in the US. And but you also were able to connect with the local communities who would then take it on, like the adults who will take it on as their part of their project.
Mhm,
How do you make that connection, and how do you make it work?
mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think you touch upon a very important point and something that I spent a tremendous amount of time doing. When we launched the project, of course, the focus was on the tool. And very quickly, within the next couple of months, I started realizing what we were actually doing is we were building a community of curious explorers that are passionate about local problems, passionate about their local community, and just needed the right sets of tools to pursue the breadth of ideas that they cared about. And so I've actually shifted for the last 5, 7 years, I've shifted all my focus from building that community and empowering the community. And one important factor that enables us to be able to do that is we have to pass the ownership. It's Foldscope is not my project. Foldscope is a project of a community of 1 million people that want to observe the microscopic world in its finest granularity across the planet. And that passing the ownership is extremely valuable. Then people don't need to take someone's permission to pursue an idea. And I think, I
Mm.
mean, we have I remember meeting a biker from a Seattle area who decided, of course, he never asked me, he never told me. He decided to carry thousands of foldscopes and
Wow.
biked in Laos and Cambodia for 6 months, biking across the country, teaching
Wow.
foldscope workshops. He wrote a book about his journey. And the first time I heard about it is when he sent me the book. And it was just a remarkable moment for me to see how clearly he saw the vision that we had shared, how uniquely he implemented his vision on top of that platform. I mean, biking was his passion, and he wanted to see communities, and he went school by school in rural communities all across Laos. And what he learned from it, he shared that back so anyone else can implement. I remember another example. I got an email in Tamil. I don't speak Tamil, I speak Hindi, but it looked important. So I translated it. And it turned out it was from a teacher that was running a 15 student school in rural Tamil Nadu, close to Vellore. And he asked for some help, and I shipped him some foldscopes. And I started getting these messages back and forth, and I started realizing the individual was just incredibly passionate. And I supported this individual in shipping microscopes. As the group and community in India grew, Mo Pandirajan, that's his name, started playing a larger role. And one day I got an email after 4 years, which had a list, and that list had a list of names of 12,000 teachers and 95,000 students that this single person had trained in the last 4 years.
Wow. Mm.
I mean,
Mm.
that is equivalent of running a workshop for 30 to 50 kids every day continuously for 4 years. And Mo has traveled the country teaching and sharing that passion. And I mean, this is his life in many ways. And it's just a remarkable teacher who potential was untapped. And I think in some sense, when we allow people to really pursue their passion, support them unquestionably, and not every experiment works in this manner, but when it does work, it's remarkable. So I think I've often felt that the role that we play is empowering communities and people. And I think the types of questions, of course, I have been focused on global health for human health. But over time, community members have really transformed the use of Foldscope in agriculture. There is a tremendous number of applications that have come out from community innovators. food adulterants, the context of animal health. There is a remarkable community inside the full scope community on environmental degradation, areas and subjects that we were not experts in. But there are experts out there who understand and use the sets of tools to deploy directly with the community. So I think this notion of passing the ownership and ensuring that others can pursue their own passion is very important. So full scope is not a hub and spoke model. There's nobody in the center. It's an organic community of people that are passionate about science. And I mean, this is also what I love about it, because if I was to fall off a cliff tomorrow, I know the community would continue to pursue their passion, which is really exactly what I wanted.
Uh, that's a wonderful to hear all that. When you talked about this individual in Laos, biking through Laos, I had goose pimples just
Yeah,
listening to it. It's
yeah.
so touching. And of course, this individual from Tamil Nadu. And incidentally, I do speak Tamil. So if you ever
Mhm.
need a translation, I'll be available.
Yeah,
Uh,
I might. Yeah, actually, it's very interesting that you said that, because on our online platform, after English, Tamil is the most spoken language.
oh,
And I
wow.
can attribute it all the way back, because every post that the community members make is dated. I can attribute that to the moment when most started engaging with the community.
Wow.
So individuals can make remarkable differences. I mean, I think from a microbiology content in Tamil, I don't know of a larger resource that's been created than what has been created by the community in native language, in a native context. If you're thinking about food and you ask, okay, how do microbes interact with food? You're thinking about cultural context. All of that is encoded in these explorations that are from the grounds up.
Wow, that's amazing. So I will certainly explore that, and we can certainly speak about that outside this meeting. You certainly touched upon the fact that often my husband says educating the educators is more valuable than trying to teach students, which keeps changing. And I think that's exactly what you're doing, is educating the educators, which should be also be a part of our as a scientist. We
Mhm,
should value that and focus on that. Many of us far too busy doing other things than interacting with the community. So there is a huge lack of community engagement on our part.
mhm,
So your last answer really gave me a segue to a new area that I want to discuss with you. You said that you are very interested in global health. And
mhm,
in particular, you had focused on schistosomiasis.
mhm,
And so could you talk to us about global health? In this is, I'm quite passionate about that, but to just focus on schistosomiasis
mhm,
and why that particular organism and how you were able to make it happen for you would be
mhm.
wonderful to hear.
Yeah, I think, again, going back to a personal story, uh, the way we started working on schistosomiasis was, I was in the field, and this is time I spent in Ghana, uh, building and thinking about programs, diagnostic screening programs in schools. And I saw firsthand both the kind of mass drug administration approaches, but also a really ironic fact, which was, I remember talking to this kid, and in a short period of time, he literally took me to his parents' farm, which was the food that they were growing. I think it was like a rice paddy. And he jumped right into the water, which was believed in the community to actually be infected, to just show me. And literally, uh, you know, it's their field. They have to work in that field to really be able to sustain food. So this idea and how we eliminated schistosomiasis in most of the parts of the world was to really block the types of waterways that were infected. That is not an option. And one of the things that started, we initially developed, and we have been developing tools for diagnostics for schistosomiasis. But it occurred to me the fact that every couple of months, a child can get reinfected from the environment. implies that just drugs will not do the trick. You really need to understand the ecology of the microbe. And we went on this quest that has really taken me to some really strange places. We've traveled around the world, really mapping and trying to understand how a single schistosomiasis parasite detects and finds humans. What are the mechanisms that it deploys? It only has a finite lifetime. So it does have an Achilles heel because the Cercaria does not feed. So it has to find a host or it will die in the next 10 hours. And we actually discovered fundamental principles of energy consumption in microswimmers in terms of how microorganisms swim because it's on such a tight energy budget. We discovered a completely new motility mechanism. And very recently, we've been able to go back full circle and really ask a question of how these parasites find humans in the first place, in the hope that if you could slow down that chemotaxis mechanism, you have a potential segue into suppressing the cycle of infection, which is necessary. So I think very interestingly for this disease, I went from most of the time, I'm really focused on diagnosis. But in this complexity and understanding the evolutionary context and the very fundamental biology of this, I am now really focused on being able to decipher these mechanisms and disrupt these mechanisms of infection. We have been doing field work in Madagascar recently. Uh, and ironically, just studying this organism, uh, because there has never been a tool that has ever been designed to observe the life of a single microbe or a microorganism in open ocean or open waters, for example. You know, we started imagining a technology. What if you could attach a GoPro camera or analogous to a GoPro camera to a microbe? I mean, we study microbes in cover slips. You put them under this confinement. How can I say this is how it actually behaves in a natural environment? And remarkably, this question from schistosomiasis led us to actually invent a new technology. We call it gravity machine, which now enables us for the first time to observe unhindered life of a microbe at subcellular resolution that is
Wow.
allowed to go freely anywhere in open water. And now we're actually applying the technology to the ocean to really understand how single cells and microbes actually control most of our climate. So it's a really tortuous path of going from uh, a village in Ghana to really asking, no, we don't understand ecology of microbes, to actually now climate change in the ocean, and much more really driven by microbes and what they do.
I mean, there's, I just smiling thinking about, your curiosity never stops at one thing, right? And when you keep asking why, and then you just they
Yeah,
take to
yeah,
other stages.
yeah.
But importantly, most of these things that have taken you to ask some fundamental questions that really dictates what's happening now and
Mhm,
what will happen in the future with the
mhm.
climate change. And so let's talk about what's happening now. So let's talk about the pandemic and how pandemic has shaped your recent research and where is that going and how do you see that moving forward?
Yeah, I think, when the pandemic hit, it's been the toughest year, both scientifically and just emotionally, and just, I mean, what has unfolded. And again, for many of us who work in global health, we knew these inequalities existed forever, but the fact that they've been so blatantly visible, and this idea that global health is about health for everyone. It has nothing to do with developed and developing countries. There is no better example to look at the pandemic itself. It is really about haves and have nots. When I think about and talk about frugal technologies, I am trying to address everyone in a rural town in UK, everyone in a rural or even an urban environment in the US, and at that same time the remote corners of the world. I think in the context of the pandemic, we've really been focused on building scientific tools and products and really delivering them to people. One of the biggest effort has really been around, can we do what we did for microscopy, but the same for molecular biology? Can we really make access to molecular tools globally? And the biggest effort in that front has really been a tool. I just happen to have it. It's called SnapDX. It's a molecular test for COVID, which is self contained, has all the reagents, and it's electricity free. It just uses hot water, and we're able to do saliva based extraction and amplification assays in a tool that roughly costs us around $1. And one of the things that I've been passionate about is how do we really bring the capacity for molecular diagnostics into our homes, into primary health centers, where the front line of the disease is. It's not good enough from a centralized facility to really stop infectious diseases. We really need to push technologies to the last mile. Yeah, so what I often say is the idea that if you can make a cup of coffee or tea, you can actually run a molecular test like this. Uh, and one of the most important aspect of what I'm excited about the next several years to come is to do exactly what we did with Foldscope, where we allowed the capacity uh, for observing the microscopic world through microscopy, but now do the same thing for molecules and molecular diagnostics to really bring the capacity of molecular diagnostics to be cost effective, so we can literally bring them to the kitchen tables and primary health centers around the world.
Thank you. That's so important because in many countries, there's no large lab,
Mhm.
let alone a lab. And having to able to do that, it's amazing because, personally, I went to Liberia immediately after the war and I saw what can be done, cannot be done. It's quite mind boggling. So many things we take for granted. But even here, if you think about it, even in a Western world, not every town, a little town, has a lab. The nearest lab is several hours away, and to deliver and get the results back. So, but if we can do it in the grassroots levels, in the healthcare centers, in the little clinics, in even in small cities in UK, US, or any countries for
Mhm.
that matter, that would be an amazing access, right? You're
Yeah,
providing access to technology, access to information that allows them to improve their personal health. And health is wealth, and poverty is simply a byproduct of
yeah,
the health. And I
yeah,
think that's my big thing about health is that you give a person the health, he can earn money and
yeah.
support health and education. This is two things that I'm very
Yes.
passionate about, health and education. That's fantastic. So uh, with this, with this the new device, and obviously it's hopefully we will see it deployed in across the world, and people should adopt it. And I'm sure people in the places where most needed will adopt it. I have no doubt about it, and I do hope that you'll get the necessary financial support to deploy that in a larger sense, and maybe crowdsource funding or something should be done.
Yeah, I've been thinking about implementation significantly. And yeah, I think there are lots of roadblocks, but frankly, if we can't do it in a pandemic, then we can't do it at all. So,
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
the roadblock mostly comes from people who wants to sell their product. That's
Yeah, I mean, I
to,
think,
to be
yeah,
honest.
the way that I think about this is affordability have to be a fundamental principle of healthcare. And what good is an innovation if it's not accessible to people? And I think that bothers me a lot in
Mm,
terms of access is and again,
mm,
access has many dimensions, many, and so, but you know, we all get to choose one path. So we all get to do what we care about doing. And
Yeah.
I'm happy in
Yeah.
contributing ways that we can.
And I'm glad that you decided to focus on microbes because microbes do run our show, whether we
They
like
do.
it or
Yes.
not, whether we like it
Yes.
or not. And
Yes.
maybe once this thing is over, you could think about how we can understand the microbiome.
Mhm.
Because that's the next big frontier for you is to developing something that tells a lot more than just a single organism.
Mhm.
I really like the idea of having a microscope at your dining table. I guess people should know that we're talking about folder scope, not the big microscope that sits there
Mhm.
blocking space. Then I think that's an
Okay.
excellent idea to bring children to the table, and even adults for that matter. That I do want to also comment on the fact that you say access and affordability has to drive the healthcare improvements, right?
Mhm.
And that's really going to make a it's going to make or break a community because access to healthcare and education, and hopefully we all do our small part to for that to happen. Has been an amazing hour that went by very quickly. uh, and I really appreciate your time and effort and what you do, and also making the time to speak with us today. The I wanted to close by asking you to comment on your like one sentence or two sentences. What would you tell the up and coming young scientists? You know, and we would be really nice. But thank you again for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm absolutely honored to receive this prize, and my hope is that it just inspires many more people to follow their passion, but importantly, share that passion with others as well. Because our journey in science is intertwined with lives of many other people and many people who came before us. And what better way than to really give this superpower almost of observation to as many people as possible? So I hope as a society and as scientific societies, we continue to provide and make access one of our integral pillars. Thank you so much.
Thank you. On behalf of the Microbiology Society, I thank you, Dr. Manu Prakash, and wish you all the very best in everything you do. And please stay in touch with the society and with me, of course. Thank you.